This lesson, we're going to talk about the ways to do some basic formatting in Microsoft Excel. Specifically, we're going to be talking about changing the fonts, font sizes, adding emphasis with bold, italics, and underline. Next, we'll talk about adding borders to a cell or group of cells. And finally, we'll look at how to add color effects to a cell or the font within a cell. And along the way, we might throw in a fun shortcut or two. Today, we're going to start by looking at the fonts that are available and see how to change the font for the current cell or cells. The first thing we want to do is make sure that we're on the home ribbon, and we're going to primarily be working with the font area, that home ribbon. And if you look up at your screen, we've got the font chooser dialog box, the font sizer, a nudge up and nudge down font size, which we'll look at. Then you have some alignment characteristics we'll get to in another unit. Below that you have some font emphasis characteristics, bold, italics, underline, some borders, and some colors. So let's just go ahead and work with the font chooser for starters. We'll click on A9, and right now that font chooser tells us we're on the system font. Well, if I want to make that Helvetica, all I have to do is click that drop down, and I can scroll down till I find Helvetica. I've used that one recently, so it's up here near the top, but if I hadn't, I could just scroll down to my list, and you see there's hundreds and hundreds of font options. And I'll click Helvetica. Now that cell is Helvetica. And we'll try another way to use that chooser. Let's go down to A10, and we're going to look for Times New Roman. So we'll click on our font drop down, then let's just start typing Times New Roman. And as soon as I hit the T, you see the drop down carried me down to where the T started, so it makes it a little bit easier. I click Times New Roman. And then finally, the third option, and work with this particular drop down, is I can just type directly in the drop down. If I know the name of the font I want to use, I can just start typing it. And you'll see that it predictively comes up with the font we want to choose. Although there can be some exceptions, it's usually a good idea for a workbook to have the same font throughout the workbook. That'll just present a more consistent and professional presentation of your information. So a way you can do that is we can click on the row and column selector next to A1 to highlight the entire worksheet, and then we can change our font to whatever we want it to be. I'm going to go ahead and go to my font chooser and use the Trebuchet font. And click enter. Now that changed the font throughout my whole worksheet to Trebuchet. Well, even though we talked about consistent fonts, there are some more fun options as well. In rows 13, 14, and 15, we might be sending out an invitation or making a movie banner or making kind of a technical document. And so I just wanted to show a couple of the fonts that might be good for those sort of things. Let's click on A13, and then for a formal invitation, we might want to use a scripting font. We'll try Lucida Calligraphy, and I'll just start typing that in. You see there's another type of Lucida font as well, black letter, and that's going to look a little different than the calligraphy. And now you see that looks kind of nice for an invitation. It's kind of softer, it's got some smooth lines. Now for a movie or a theatrical look, we can use the Herculean font. This one, I'm going to show you about the font categories underneath the font drop down. We'll click the font drop down box. And here we're going to go to font collections and go over to the fun collection. Now all these fonts are still in the main list, but this is just another way to categorize them as to what we want. So we'll try Herculean, and that'll be a little bit more dramatic for a movie title or something. And then lastly, for some kind of technical document, we might want something that's just going to be kind of a little generic and very easy to read and interpret. So we'll again use the font collections. This time we're going to go down to PDF, and we're going to choose Courier. That's probably the oldest font you can find. It's been around since the old typewriters, and it's a pretty standard technical font. So we'll click on that one. Well, now that we've looked at a few ways to select a font, let's scroll down a little bit and look at some ways to size our font. I'm going to click in cell A23, and the first thing we want to do is look at the sizing drop-down box. Right now that tells me this font size is 8. Easiest thing I can do is click it and select another font size, and I'm going to select 12. Now the next thing I'm going to do is go down to A24 and see how to nudge the font sizes. I can click on this increase font size and decrease font size to show you what happens. And in increments, rather nicely. Keeps going up. And then we can go down as well. So these are quick tools to increase or decrease the font size. Notice one thing in the size drop down. The font sizes go 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then they go by twos, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, and then they jump up a lot from 28 to 36 to 48 to 72. So that leads us to our next point, is that if you want to make a font like, say, 40 points large, you don't have that option. You've got 36 and 48. Well, the nice thing about this sizing dropdown is you can just type in whatever number you want, and Excel will make that font whatever size you want, even if it isn't listed in the dropdown list specifically. And then for the last sizing box, we'll look down here and see that we've actually made some text font size 2. And you see in the formula bar, the text is still there, so I can barely read the text in this cell, even though you can't see it, it's size 2. And we were able to do that by just typing in the 2. We can bring that up to a readable size in our worksheet.